Hello, and thank you for joining me today, Michael Weir, your NSE 7 Certified Technical Account Manager, for a talk about Sunburst, the SolarWinds breach. Now, I'm sure people have seen this on the news. When something reaches CNN and they're asking the president for his response, as a cyber incident, that means you've reached the upper echelons of fame. Typically, the public doesn't really think about cybersecurity. So, let's talk quickly about Sunburst here. So first we have to look at what happened, which is how do we get to the point that we're at where we're having this conversation. Number two is who got hit. Now this is a little preview here. This product involved was called SolarWinds Orion. So we're going to talk about who uses it. Number three, let's talk about what can you do. So how can you harden your environment against things like this so you're not the next victim. And then number four, closing thoughts, where you get to bask in the glow of my knowledge. Now just where I'm going to draw a few conclusions and hopefully we can take actionably into what we're doing in the future. So, first, what happened? How do we get to this conversation? So what this was overall is something called a supply chain attack. Now, a supply chain attack is something that comes through a third party. It's getting into an environment via a product or a service or something else that's being delivered through a third party, not something that's in the organization itself. So it's not hacking the organization's firewall or something like that. It's finding a way to get around it to something else in the environment. Now, third-party supply chain attacks can come in a bunch of different forms. The famous incidents I'm highlighting here, first was the Target breach, all the credit card information lost and all that kind of thing. That came in through contractors that were there doing some HVAC work. An example of one through hardware would be Heartbleed. So Heartbleed was a problem with Intel chips that could cause data to leak, and obviously that's not attacking an organization's file system or firewall or something like that. That's attacking something that's in the literal firmware itself. And then, of course, software is where we are right now, SolarWinds. SolarWinds being a third-party management and other software provider to a lot of organizations, big and small. So this is how it happened in a very oversimplified way, and I'll say right up, the things I'm talking about here aren't meant to be complete technical explanations. This is an overview in just semi-technical terms so people can get a feel of what went on. More of a layman's type thing. So if you're, got 15 different cybersecurity certifications or something, you're probably going to say, well, I could have said that. Anyway, so first, it was hijacked, so hackers found a way to put malicious code into a SolarWinds Orion update. Now, updates are usually signed and trusted and everything else by the manufacturer, so that when it comes across, you just hit your little update button and everything works out okay. But this particular update installed some malicious code in Orion with that routine update, and then it exfiltrated data. It was sent out to specified locations, but it was buried inside these normal packets that would come out for performance improvement inside of Orion. So there'd be nothing on a firewall or something like that says, hey, system information shouldn't be going out this way, no triggers, anything like that, because this is legitimate traffic that normally comes out of SolarWinds. So, that brings us to our next question of who got hit. You'll notice it says there who uses SolarWinds Orion. So this is the thing about companies being hit, is when you're hitting one of these attacks, you might not necessarily want to make it public, because then people learn something about your infrastructure. So we'll probably never know the complete list or the complete number of people who were victimized in this attack. Plus the attack is still ongoing, but that's a different story. So this Orion is quite a large product. So of the Fortune 500, 425 of them, and these are all from publicly available statistics and the like, 425 of them in the Fortune 500 use SolarWinds Orion, so they'd be vulnerable to this. The top 10 telecom operators in the U.S. all use SolarWinds Orion. In terms of our government, the U.S. Departments of State, Energy, Treasury, Commerce, and Homeland Security, and potentially Defense, all use SolarWinds Orion and have admitted to being in some way breached by this attack. And then there's some major cybersecurity hardware and software manufacturers who themselves were breached because they used Orion on their internal systems. Something somewhat ironic there. We'll get to how to stop this in the future. But the estimate is 18,000 total victims impacted, with my asterisks there that not all people are going to report, hey, I was impacted, especially in jurisdictions where there is no mandatory reporting laws in place. So, what can we do? How can you harden your environment against things like this happening in the future? So, this is a little branching tree diagram for me. So, we're talking about SolarWinds attack or a supply chain attack in general. So if you think you're a victim, some of the first things to check is to validate your domain names on all your servers, make sure things are looking right there. If you're suspicious that something's not looking right with your domain names, capture and check some packets and see if their content is what you would expect for the port and protocol that they're on. And then number 3, check the RAM for attack vectors. Now, just getting a little more technical on this, the SolarWinds, there was a couple of attack vectors that hung out in the RAM that weren't actually, quote unquote, installed. They were transient in such a way to be much harder to detect, and those were Teardrop and Cobalt's Beacon. So if you think you're a victim of a SolarWinds attack, do a RAM capture and look and see if there's anything indicative of those two in there. And for those who weren't a victim and don't want to be a victim, which should be everybody, nobody wants to be a victim, there's a couple of basic steps you can take. Number one is sandbox all updates and packages. Now, without naming any names, some of the specific manufacturers have said that their sandbox in testing environments post-attack was able to catch the attack when it was coming in and say, hey, there's malicious code embedded in this routine update. And some couldn't. But it's always a good idea to sandbox anything that's going to be installed. So not just EXEs, but sandbox patches that are coming in. Sandbox, even things that are coming in for Android and things you wouldn't normally think of going on a laptop or going on. Sandbox is security camera update if you have one. Anything that's new information coming into your system and being installed should be sandboxed. The second thing to do is to segment your networks. So even if there is somehow a breach in one, it is as contained as possible. Now, obviously, SolarWinds, just because of the nature of the Orion product, it has to see into a lot of different parts of your network. There's no way around that. But it's just best practice in general to avoid any kind of infection, to do a zero trust or do a thing where everything has the least possible access to anything else on the network. And the third thing to do is to use an enterprise EDR. Now, there are some products out there that say they're EDR when really they're just using things like decoy files. And then there's products that are actual EDR where they're watching processes and they're watching new connections and that kind of thing. If for those companies that would have been using an enterprise EDR product, the likelihood that this would have worked, this attack would have victimized them, would have been very, very low because it would be caught pre-execution. It would say, all right, this new connection being built is to somewhere we don't want it to be, or there's a sudden change in this or that. It's the kind of thing that could be spotted. You could probably also spot it if you were using a SIM solution. However, it takes some manual work to say this traffic, while not anomalous, is going to a new destination or something like that. You have to look at very specific things. But those are what I would say would be the major things to look for. And here's some closing thoughts, as I said, basking in the glow of my knowledge. So, a lot of this is intuitive and simple. Number one is that risk is everywhere. Like I said, risk can be anything. It can be your security camera, an update coming in for your security camera, your printer. It can be the Android phone that somebody's brought in to watch shows during their lunch hour or something like that. It could be a corporate-owned laptop. Anything that contains anything that connects to the internet is a potential risk. Even if it doesn't connect to the internet, if you all remember Stuxnet, that was something that came in via internet-connected devices, then onto flash drives, then onto industrial machines. So anything coming in is some kind of vulnerability. And another thing is the rewards are high and the risks are low for international bad actors. Now, in national bad actors, acting inside their own nation, usually the risks are higher, and even if the rewards are high, the risks tend to outweigh them. Attacking the Department of Defense, most people aren't going to do that. But for international bad actors who are at least partially sanctioned or supported by a foreign government, there are high rewards for doing this stuff, and their government will generally shield them from the risks. So for them, there's no downside of this opportunity. Another thing we learned from this is that emergency procedures are largely absent. A lot of these corporations that got hit, their responses to it took a while to be activated. It was not a case of when A happens, we instantly do B. It was a case of this happened that we didn't anticipate, now let's scramble and try to fit into an existing procedure and make some new ones. And you can look up some of the organizations that were hit and see exactly how it happened. And I think you'll find that I'm generally right on that. And the last thing to say is that prevention is always cheaper than the cure. So people say, oh man, I don't want to spend all that money to put in an EDR solution and put in a sandbox that can handle that many files and all these other things. Well, the issue is you will end up paying way more than that after a breach. Even setting aside fines and that sort of thing that you're going to have to pay, or compliance and regulatory things, your reputation is going to be damaged. There's going to be infrastructure that needs to be replaced. There's going to be there's just a whole litany of issues, aside from the fines that will probably hit you and the amount of money you'll probably lose from there, that'll at the very least impair your productivity and potentially just cost you a lot of money bringing your environment back to a safe state, let alone improving on it afterwards. So, thank you for watching. If you have any questions, there is my email right there, michaelweir@ingrammicro.com. Let me know what you think. Let me know if there's anything else I can do for you, if there's any solutions you would like to talk about more. Otherwise, thank you very much and have a good day.